And we're on.
And we are. Podcast episode number 5.
Number 5.
I believe we're on. Here with Tyler Casselman. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ramsey.
Thank you for being here. All right. Tyler, the Wing Chun Pilgrim himself. I don't know if you've seen this guy on the web, but he's got a channel. He practices Wing Chun, but not just that. Tyler practices a lot of different martial arts. In fact, go ahead and give us a quick introduction about yourself and what you're all about, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Well, I started martial arts when I was about 20 years old, after my first year of university. But I was thinking about kind of my martial arts story a little bit the last couple days, kind of, I was like, because I knew, of course, you're going to ask me that, right? And I distinctly remember being kind of fascinated with martial arts pretty much as far back as I can remember. And I mean, you can say it was like, it's kind of inside our pop culture. And, when I was a kid, and I'm sure when you're a kid as well, it was like, it was still okay to kind of resolve problems with violence on TV, right? So you had like the Ninja Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you had the Power Rangers, and you had like Transformers, and, kind of a wide variety of, I don't know if you know this, but there's like all these movies during the 90s as well, like the Three Ninjas and Karate Kid, and so I mean that was still kind of
the team of good guys versus the team of bad guys.
And the good guys were still good guys trying to be nice and like respectful and friendly and stuff, but in the end, you had to kind of throw down. So if today it was if I don't know, because I don't watch cartoons today, but I'm assuming if you wanted to have a version of the Ninja Turtles, it would be like the Teenage Mutant talking turtles or something, or or friendship turtles or something, so anyways.
Did you hear about what happened in England when that show was on the air? They changed it from Ninja Turtles to Hero Turtles.
Hero Turtles.
Did you hear about that?
Is Ninja racist or something, or what's
Well, there was this big controversy in the UK because apparently Ninja was deemed to be too violent for children, and also the nunchucks that Michelangelo carried.
I love nunchucks.
That is an illegal weapon in the UK, and so they took that out of the show and replaced it with like ropes and stuff. So if you watch the later seasons,
definitely less cool than nunchucks.
Even in the US,
substantially.
Michelangelo didn't usually use his nunchucks in the later seasons. He used a grappling hook or a rope or something like that.
I mean, grappling hooks are pretty cool, but they're more for climbing buildings and stuff, Batman style. They're not really used for fighting, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
I digress, though.
Yeah, I digress. Basically, I was always kind of fascinated with martial arts, but without going super too much into it, I came from kind of a poorish family, with my single mother family, and so we didn't really have a lot of extra income around to kind of put me into this lesson and that lesson, and all this kind of stuff I might have been interested in. So it was really only after I went to university and I kind of got this like pretty substantial, probably the first substantial amount of money in my life was from my student loan. And I got my first real exposure to an actual martial art from an actual martial art teacher. It was Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it was kind of like the local university club. And we did, what was the guy's name? Basically, he was an exact duplicate of, not exact, but he was like more or less a duplicate of Master Ken. Like, like the Ameridote guy.
Yeah.
And like, he would like come into class in cowboy boots, and he would like and he would talk about like bar fights, and he's like, well, you got your shit kickers and you kick them in the groin, and like, it was super cool, because like, we had the gi, and I had my white belt, and you're like, oh man, I look like Ryu, I'm super cool, and the techniques that we learned, I mean, they weren't so terrible. I mean, there was some pretty cool stuff, like the one where they grab your jacket and then you do like the wrist throw, or they grab you by the shoulders and you kind of do like a judo kind of thing. But I distinctly remember being disappointed or not satisfied with the blocks in terms of strikes.
Oh,
so
sure.
that I really didn't sell me on it. And although they had some cool ideas, like against a roundhouse punch or a hook punch, you kind of put both arms up and you like smash it as hard as you can with your forearm bones, basically.
Yeah.
And while I think it's kind of cool to train it because it's like, whoa, I smashed this guy's arm. And then like when the instructor did it to me, I remember like my arm kind of going a little bit numb and like pins and needles and stuff. I was like, whoa, it's like, it's not quite chi power, but I remember it's like, oh, it's kind of cool. But, already at that time as a complete newbie to martial arts is like, I don't know, if that's really gonna protect you in a situation where potential further punches are coming and you're basically 100% facing this way. Well, like all over here is like, doesn't he have another arm over there, sensei?
I had the same feeling about karate and taekwondo blocks.
Yes.
The upward block, middle block, low block, and And yeah, that stuff doesn't work so great for blocking punches. I don't think it was ever really intended for that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think that's something that I kind of think about sometimes is like how much of the martial arts, like the traditional martial arts that still are in existence and we still practice today, like how much of those were kind of drawn from like battlefield scenarios, like where the dude has like a giant spear and you're meant to like kind of move his spear out of the way and then spear him through the chest and stuff, and how much of those things are kind of jerry-rigged, like MacGyvered into like, oh, this is for a punch and this is for a kick and this is how we do a takedown and stuff, But anyways, yeah. So I digress. So I got my first exposure in university at my first year there. And but like I said, I distinctly remember not being satisfied with the blocks. So I remember I mean, and I was, as soon as I got it, I was crazy. Like I caught like a fever, like I would come before class and train. I would go after class. I would stay after class and train. I would find anyone who would train with me and I'd be like, man, let's go train. Like I caught an absolute fever. And I think at this time, I started to get into kind of a little bit of acrobatic stuff as well. Like, I remember like running at the wall and like, you kind of run and do a backflip off the wall and like this kind of cool, like more cool, like ninja kind of kung fu movie type stuff. I think this was...
it's the stuff every kid wants to do,
Exactly.
man.
I think it was around the time that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out, which would have been like early 2000s or something, and anyways, yeah. So, but I remember staying like, we had a pretty big training room. It was maybe 8 meters wide, maybe, no, more than that, maybe 10 meters wide and then 30 meters deep. And it was essentially like a wrestling room. And then you had the padded walls as well. And I remember I have these memories of myself kind of being in the training room there alone on like a Friday night with like the lights are out everywhere in the gym. And I'm literally making up my own blocks because I was like, man, those blocks suck. This is bullshit. It doesn't work. I got to think of another way to like, okay, what if someone punches me like this? What if I do this? Or what if I do that? Or like, what if I do this? I was like, because it just didn't click with me, that aspect of it. And you know what else is kind of funny is that I remember at this time there was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. Well, but when I looked on the syllabus, it's like, you had Taekwondo. I was like, well, Taekwondo, that's not that cool. I mean, maybe you can learn some kicks, but it's not good. And then there was Japanese jiu-jitsu. I was like, oh, Japanese jiu-jitsu, that sounds pretty cool. And then there was Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I was like, well, Brazilian jiu-jitsu? What the hell is that? What the hell do Brazilians know about jiu-jitsu? And obviously I hadn't seen like the UFC fights or anything. And yeah, there was a couple other. There was a karate, and then there wasn't any kung fu because if there's kung fu, I for sure would have done the kung fu. But there was a bunch of I think there was fencing and like anyway, just a pretty standard university curriculum, for as far as clubs go. And I remember seeing the Brazilian jiu-jitsu because they kind of had their class sometimes on the same nights as our class. And I think the guy, he might have been a brown belt, maybe a purple belt, and he was coaching there. And I just remember seeing the guys like on the ground, kind of like rolling around, and I was like, I remember thinking to myself, like, man, what the hell? You can't use that in a fight. It's like you can't roll around on the ground in a fight. Like you'll get your head kicked in. You can't do that.
Nobody believes the Brazilian jiu-jitsu works in a fight until you see it in an actual fight for some reason.
Oh yeah, it's weird like that, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny now that I think about that. My life could have taken a drastically different path if I had just chosen that Brazilian jiu-jitsu instead of Japanese jiu-jitsu, but anyways, so I finished the year off and I had my first real taste of martial arts. and I loved it. I was crazy about it. It was like, oh man, I think very early on I made the connection to video games, because I was always crazy. I love video games as well. And I think you talked a little bit about this with Eunice, right? Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and immediately, because one of my favorite kind of games to play was role-playing game, RPG, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of start out as like whatever, like a normal dude, and you're kind of wandering through the world, and there's a story and such, and this and that and the other thing. And but what's cool is like the leveling up part, right? So it's like you go out into the woods, and then you fight like a little blob, and you kill 100 blobs, and then you get a level up, and then like the next you fight a slightly larger, more dangerous blob, right? And then you kill 100 of those, and then you level up. So it's like I made that connection really, really early on, where it's like the more I do this thing, the better that I get at it over time, So it's like I'm kind of leveling up, like in a video game, and that to me was just like my dopamine was just like firing in my brain. And I think it's one of the first times when I think back about it, it's one of the first times where I kind of realized that just exactly that. When you do something, when you study it and you practice it, you get better at it. And because it's weird to say now, because it sounds insane and stupid and ridiculous to believe the opposite. But for the longest time, I remember believing like if you're not good at something, then you're just bad at it. You're just stupid, right? Like you're just not good.
It's shocking how many people believe that.
Yeah, it's insane, right? I mean, now that you're an experienced martial artist, and you know how improvement works, and you know how I don't know. I'm sure you have read about it. In fact, like the myelin and like the nerves, and how like when you practice something over and over, it like coats your neurons, and like when they're coated more thickly, they fire more fast. They fire faster, not more fast. Sorry.
It's
but
okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. Well, I'm so used to speaking like Chinese English, like second language English, that it comes out quite often like, oh, let's do that more good, or let's do it more fast.
My kids say that all the time. My kids, they grew up here in China. They were born and raised here, and they use what would you call it? Chinglishisms all the time.
Yes,
Chinglishisms. Is that a real word?
I think it should be, if it's not.
It's a lot of code switching goes on with the syntax.
Yes. So yeah. Anyways, like I said, I made that connection early on, and then once I went back, so this is where the change really kind of happened for me, because like I mentioned, I was crazy for martial arts. I loved all kinds of movies, like kung fu movies. Like I love Jet Li, I love Bruce Lee. Donnie Yen, not so much, because he wasn't so big, at least overseas at that time. But like Jet Li and Bruce Lee were huge. Like Jet Li's got to be one of my all-time favorite heroes in martial arts. And I'm sure you've seen his old movies, like the one in particular that really kind of sticks out to me, and that I've watched so many times is Fist of Legend.
Fist of Legend. Oh man,
that one is so good. Right?
Wasn't that a remake of the Chinese Connection?
It exactly
Bruce
was.
Lee
It was a remake of Bruce Lee's movie, and if you guys haven't seen that, you really missed a classic. And I think if you watch it today, you can probably find like the Blu-ray version of it. And a lot of times when you find those like Blu-ray versions of old movies, they can really clean them up a lot and like make them look really good. So it'd be worth checking out. But yeah, basically like he's a kind of the top student of a Chinese master, right? And then he goes to Japan and studies, and like the Japanese are racist against him and they hate him, and he like kicks their ass with kung fu and stuff. And then he comes back, and the Chinese had poisoned his master, and he like hunts them all down. And anyways, yeah, super, super, super cool movie. Almost like a Game of Death style movie, right? Where it's like there's tiers, and again, like a video game where it's like there's bosses, and you have to like work your way up. You start with all the lower guys, and then you go to the higher guy, and then you get to the top guy.
That's one of the great things about those classical kung fu movies. It was like live action Double Dragon, you fight the little guys and you work your way up to the bosses. Exactly.
Double Dragon, man, that was such a classic. Me and my brother played the hell out of that game. So sorry, we digress again, but it's good. So anyway, where I really caught the first fire for that was it. But when I really felt like I met my first master was when after my first year university. My friend Kevin, who's like one of my best friends from my childhood, and we both went to high school together and elementary school together. And I kind of went off to university in Guelph, which is in southern Ontario. Oh, sorry, I'm from Canada. and I'm from Northern Ontario, like Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury is the two cities I kind of grew up in between, and both are about 100,000 people, which for Canada is not, it's not huge, definitely not huge, not small. It's kind of like middle-sized, Canadian city. So we have like everything, movie theater and shopping mall and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's not Toronto or Ottawa, which is like, probably 2 million or so.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, but I went off to Southern Ontario, and he kind of stayed there, and he did woodworking. So he went to college for woodworking, and I loved woodworking when I was in high school. And I took like all those classes, like welding, cabinet making, crafts, like all this kind of stuff. I loved working with my hands. For a long time, for a while, I wanted to be a welder. I thought that would be pretty cool. And my uncle was like a steel pipe fitter, so like those stainless steel pipes they use in like water processing plants and milk plants and stuff. So he did that, and the pay is super high. But anyway, yeah. So anyways, he stayed in Sudbury, which is where I was, which is where I went to high school, and I came back, and I was kind of thinking about what to do for the summer, right? So I obviously needed a job, I needed money, and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, well, should I go back to the Sioux, which is where my family was, or should I go back to Sudbury, which is where my friends were, or should I stay in Southern Ontario, which is another thing. But he told me, he's like, yo, Tyler, I started this I found this crazy kung fu school in our hometown. I never knew it was there before, but I started about 3 months ago. It's wild. You learn crazy Bruce Lee stuff. And and he like showed me all these pictures of him like doing these like kung fu poses and stuff. And he's like, yeah, now I can like side kick as high as my head, and I can do these like spinning back kicks and stuff. And I was like, man, that sounds incredible. Sign me up. So I went back to Sudbury, and I ended up signing up there, and I found a landscaping job. So, because in university I was studying landscape architecture.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and as far as that goes, that was not quite a rabbit, like just pulling out of the rabbit out of the hat or pulling it out of my ass or whatever. But kind of it was, because honestly I didn't really know what I wanted to do. In reality, if I could have, like, if money didn't exist, I probably would have studied history or philosophy, because I really loved both of those things, and I still do. But I kind of knew that studying those things, I could imagine down the road it'd be hard to find work, and it would be hard to get paid unless you like studied for super long time,
Yeah.
And I also kind of pondered to myself that if I really love those things, I can just study them on my own. Like, I can read books about it. I can find people to talk with about it. I can study on my own. It's not like you have to, the only place to learn about history is in a university, or the only place to learn about philosophy is from a philosophy teacher.
Absolutely. And also in a university, you're going to get a very specific version of history.
Absolutely.
Whereas go out and seek the truth on your own, you're going to find it's a little bit different.
Yeah, a lot of different opinions and a lot of different ideas. So so I basically I asked, because I know I myself struggled with this about what to do with my life. Big surprise. But I basically tried to think about the things that I like to do, and I always liked solving problems. I always liked thinking critically and analyzing things, kind of breaking things down. I loved drawing. I was obsessed with drawing when I was younger. It's weird, when I think about it, that I had all these different phases, these things that I was obsessed with, right? So I remember being a kid and like drawing comic books and like creating stories and like writing comic books about my friends and me, like we're these like special warriors and we have to save the princess and stuff.
My viewers are going to want to see your artistic talents now. I mentioned in one of my videos that I used to draw dragons a lot all the time when I was a kid, and they're like, show us your dragons.
Oh, damn.
They want to see the proof, man.
Yeah, no, but I think the thing that really gave me something to hold on to in terms of drawing was when I found Dragon Ball. And I absolutely loved Dragon Ball. And I'm sure lots of the guys out there, like within, our age range, like I grew up first on the original Dragon Ball show, where Goku, he had his like blue shirt, and then he had his red staff that could like extend, and then he had his like kind of hot girlfriend, not really girlfriend, but his friend that was a girl, Bulma, and they had like these kind of misadventures together and stuff.
I've only ever seen Dragon Ball in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah, the only country I've ever seen it aired on television was in Argentina.
Yeah.
Like when I lived down there, people watch TV all the time. Television's just always on in the background, and so anytime I'd visit somebody's house, they'd be like Dragon Ball would be on. It would be either that or some telenovela, something going on. So I don't even know what the characters are named in English, to be honest.
But yeah, so that was when I was like quite young. But a little bit older, then Dragon Ball Z came out, which is kind of like the next iteration in the show. And I think that's probably for most Western people, that's probably like the go-to childhood TV show. And then it's about like fighting and violence and like conflict resolution through combat and stuff.
And martial arts.
And I mean, the Kamehameha is like super famous, right? Everybody knows that. It's kind of the same deal like Ryu, like his Hadouken or whatever. But I think Goku's is even a bit more iconic. So anyways, I had all these VHSs of Dragon Ball shows because I'd record them on TV, right? And then I'd like share them with my friends. And I'd have the VHS, and then I would like freeze it on my TV, like I'd pause it because VHSs were a thing then. Back in my day, we had VHS tapes.
Man, our old man stories are way different than our grandpa's.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'd freeze the VHS, and then I would just I'd draw it and be like, okay, it looks like this and looks like this, and eventually over the course of a couple of years, I got pretty good at it. And funny enough, when I ended up making my portfolio, so I applied to architecture school, landscape architecture, industrial design, environmental engineering, and there's one more, but I can't remember. So I had to kind of split my portfolio because almost every one of those required a portfolio. So I put most of my good marbles into the landscape architecture portfolio, and I ended up getting in there. So anyways, then I went back to Sudbury and I started doing kung fu, and my first kung fu teacher, man, he was a real beast of a dude. He wasn't big, but he was a scrapper, and he taught kind of what I would say like a fusion of Wing Chun and Taekwondo. And he was very heavily influenced by Bruce Lee as well. So he was very open-minded in terms of kung fu, not really so much in terms of grappling or wrestling, which is fine, that's okay. And but yeah, like we trained really hard, I would say, even compared to how I've trained like MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff now. Like even compared to that training, like modern fighter training, we still trained really, like we trained on this like a very similar kind of caliber.
Now that is a really interesting fusion of martial arts, because a lot of Wing Chun instructors I've met are very adamant against the Taekwondo style high kicks, and I've always thought, well, why? I mean, if you were good at them, if you were good enough to balance and do that stuff, I think it would be really complimentary. So what was that like specifically?
His style and the way he fought was quite dynamic. I wouldn't say it was purely Wing Chun, for sure not purely Wing Chun, but definitely not purely Taekwondo as well. I would say it's kind of, he had his own kind of Jeet Kune Do kind of thing going on, where basically he had some of the time he had like a very solid and stable rooted stance where it was almost like 50-50 or 40-60, 60-40 kind of thing. And his hand techniques were incredibly fast and powerful. Like you'd try to hit him and he would just clear and counterattack. But then from a distance, as soon as you would open up, man, he could come with side kicks like dragon kicks or Bruce Lee kicks. He'd come with side kicks, come with low kicks, come with round kicks, come with head kicks, and all kinds of stuff. So he was a very, very difficult guy to spar with. And I think I got very, very lucky in terms of my first Kung Fu school. First, I feel like they did, like I said, like intense training, and they, on top of that, they did a lot of conditioning. So his kind of specialty was iron fist training. So he learned that from his Sifu down in Southern Ontario in Toronto, and he had these kind of bags on the wall. I'm sure you've seen them before, but in every Wing Chun school, you have these kind of bags on the wall, right?
Sandbags.
Yeah, that's right.
On the wall,
that's right.
Just punch them over and over.
Yeah. So he had like a very specific method to do these things. So you had the sandbag, and then you also had like the bag that was on a table, right? And then he would do like the iron palm, right? Like bang, bang, like over and over and over. And then he had, that kind of like special ointment or whatever he'd rub in there, which I was not entirely sold on, but I just did it anyways. Whatever, I did it because it did feel good afterwards. But maybe it was psychological. Who knows? Anyway, so it was pretty cool because, like I said, he had. So we had. Normally, they're all filled with either rice or with sand. Right, and it's pretty hard. Like, and if you have a canvas bag, that's one thing. But his bags were all covered with a very, very thick leather, so it's like it's much more resistant to your punch, and it's much harder to penetrate into the bag than if the bag is canvas and it can kind of wrap around your hand. Right. So it's like he really had to develop the intention and the idea that when you hit the bag, you have to penetrate through the bag. Right, and what made it kind of not quite magical or something, but what gave him a kind of supernatural kind of aura, and kind of idolized a bit by the students, I think, not in a bad way, is that he had the first bag was rice, right? The second bag was sand. The third bag was sand and rocks, like stones, small stones. The fourth bag was stones, and the last bag was steel ball bearings. Steel ball bearings, a bag full of steel ball bearings. And if anyone foolishly ventured, when Sifu wasn't there, of course, if anyone was foolish enough to attempt to hit the bag with steel ball bearings, their fist would swell up and basically turn purple.
Because they hadn't leveled up yet.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So for me, I mostly stuck on the rice bag and the sand bag and the iron palm and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, yeah, we did that kind of iron shirt, where we would stand in our horse stance, and the guys would kick our ribs and kick our legs, and then we do. I don't know if you've ever seen that drill where you go like me and you are facing each other, and we hit our arms on the inside, and then we hit our arms on the outside, and it's like bang, 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 and we do that kind of arm conditioning. And man, I was so crazy about it that when I went home, I'd go to the tree in my front yard. It was like not a birch tree, maybe a beech tree. Is it beech? Not anyway. It had kind of like a smoothish bark, right? And I would whack my arm against the tree, like I do that same drill. To toughen up. But I mean, it's kind of similar like the Thai guys do, right? With their kicking banana trees and stuff. And he kind of had like a kind of a thing that you do where when you get the bruises on your arm, you're supposed to like first push it and then like push it down and like always back up towards your heart, right? So I guess the idea is that if you pushed out the bruises, it would harden up and heal faster than if you just kind of like let the swelling stay in there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean essentially that's what do you call it? Myofascial self-release. It's a form of stretching. One of the most commonly misunderstood forms of stretching. I mean, it's the same thing you do with, say, a foam roller.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same basic philosophy there. Is break up the bruised or damaged tissue and get the blood flowing in that area again to increase healing.
Yeah, man. I remember I have all these times where I'd go home with like bruises after training, bruises on my arms and bruises on my fist, and my skin would always break open on my knuckles and stuff. And when you punch that kind of a bag, your knuckles tend to like spread out a little bit each time, and on this space in between the knuckles, I'd have kind of bleeding in there and stuff. And sometimes the bruises were so bad you couldn't push them out with your hand or even a stick, so you'd have to find something hard, preferably like a table or whatever that was really heavy, and then you'd take your hand or you'd take your arm, like the blade of your arm, and like sink it, right, and then like push it and grind out the bruises that way. Yeah.
A lot of powerlifters do the same thing with like an iron bar or a dumbbell or a barbell, and just roll that back and forth across the forearm to work out those that tension.
Yeah. So and that summer, man, I mean, I'm not trying to brag or something, but man, in that summer I was a beast, because or by the end of the summer I was anyways. Because like I said, I had a landscaping job, and it was basically like 8 hours a day of like lifting patio stones and digging holes and laying sod and all this kind of really kind of heavy, intensive labor kind of work. And then, but that was in town, so I didn't have a car, obviously, and the bus was quite infrequent. So I would bring my bike on the bus in the morning at like 6 a.m. and I would take that to the city where I worked. And then after work, in order to get back in time for kung fu class, I would ride my bike along the highway for an hour. I'd stuff pasta down my face like there was no tomorrow. And then I would go to kung fu class for like 2 hours. And then, like, it's so crazy to think about it now. But then sometimes I wouldn't be tired after kung fu class, and I would come home and I would do more training at home, like lifting weights. But I mean, that's I mean, when you're 20 or 21 or whatever, I mean, you know, that's the kind of training you can do, because you're just pure energy. I mean, if you can harness it, right? Like if you're on the couch or doing nothing, then you feel tired all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, when you're younger, it's more difficult to appreciate the value of rest and recovery.
Also a point.
When you're pushing 40, man, that's a whole different story, though.
Yes. I'm not quite there, but I'm getting there. So anyways, I stayed with this master for like 2 years, and I went back again the next summer, and I joined a couple competitions. Like I joined the Canadian National Sanda Championship, and I ended up getting 3rd place while kind of under that school. And it was a great community. I mean, the Sifu was great. The students all like loved and respected him, and it was a really nice kind of family atmosphere kind of thing, you know. And that was my first time to kind of really experience that kind of nice, like outside of your actual family, obviously, outside of your actual family, that kind of a super close, tight knit group. We'd go out for dinner, and we would hang out on the weekends, and there was about 5 or 6 guys who were around my age, and we would all just hang out and go over to my friend's house, and he'd play piano, and we'd have some pops and sing songs and that kind of stuff. That was great, man. So anyway, I ended up completely out of nowhere. I ended up this is now like second year university. I end up getting just a way completely unbelievable scholarship, just for not for no reason, but it's like $45,000 Canadian, which is, I don't know, I guess maybe 40 or 38,000 US dollars.
That is substantial.
It's not nothing. It's not nothing. That's for sure. And it's funny enough, like there was like this scholarship form. And I literally just like that all you had to do to apply to these scholarships was like literally check off a box. So I took the form and I literally just checked off every single box that I could apply for. And it ended up being one of the biggest scholarships from the university. And it was basically just based on financial need, right? And because I was paying for school myself, and I didn't have any help at all from my family or my parents or whatever. And like I said, single parent family and all that jazz, you know. So, I mean, maybe I needed it, you know, but for sure that opened up a lot of doors for me, which I think is the real intention and idea of the scholarship, right? And it just goes to show you, you know, if you just try something, it doesn't matter if you succeed or fail, but if you just try, sometimes things happen, right? Which is cool. But if you never try, you never give that chance to happen, you know what I mean?
That is an important life lesson, friends.
Yes. So anyways, like I said, I got that scholarship, and in 3rd year university, you have the chance to do an internship, an exchange, or you can stay on campus in Guelph and take elective courses and topics that you're interested in and stuff. But the only thing I cared about, obviously, was Kung Fu. And in reading the curriculum of my landscape architecture degree, I kind of read the fine print on the 3rd year exchange. And technically speaking, you didn't explicitly have to go to a school that had a landscape architecture program. So what was the first place that I looked to go? Hong Kong, of course. That's where my hero was from, Bruce Lee. That's where Wing Chun was famously kind of expanded by Yip Man. And of course, I'd never been to Asia. I'd never been outside of North America, in fact. And so I was like, well, I got the scholarship money, I could go to Asia and learn kung fu under like the kind of modern day masters. So I ended up talking to my kind of course guidance counselor guy, and I found that Guelph did in fact have a relationship with one school with one school in Hong Kong named Lingnan University, and it's kind of like in the outskirts of Hong Kong and the New Territories, quite far away from Central and Kowloon and stuff. But that didn't matter; it was irrelevant to me. I just wanted to get to Hong Kong, right?
If you've never been to Asia before, it's all Asia, man.
Yeah, and funny enough, when I was first thinking about going to Hong Kong, I thought Hong Kong was in Japan. It's so bad to think about it now, but man, I mean, before you're like kind of a world traveler, or before you've been to Asia or whatever, I think it's not a super uncommon thing to have no idea about this city or that city or whatever. But anyways, so I made my way to Hong Kong on this scholarship, which was amazing, and I studied. I guess you've probably seen the Yip Man movie, or the Yip Man.
I saw the first two.
Yes,
I haven't seen number 3. Is that the one with Mike Tyson?
That is the one with Mike Tyson.
Okay.
I think it's not the best one. Probably the first one has the strongest story and the best overall construction. But and another funny point is that I was actually in Hong Kong when that movie was released, and I went to see it on the first day it came out. Anyway, yeah, so I went to Hong Kong and I studied with one of Yip Man's sons. So he was, I didn't know who the heck to study with, right? Because I was just still kind of getting into the whole Wing Chun culture and community and stuff. So I just kind of looked up Yip Man. It's like, well, did he have any kids? Like, who's teaching the Yip Man, the real Yip Man, kung fu now? And
lineage is so important in martial arts.
It is. It's a super important thing. That's something I talk about sometimes with my other kung fu friends and whatever that I have in the past, is that your lineage, it's kind of like your university degree, right? So it's like, did you get your university degree from Harvard? Or did you get it from, Timbuktu College out of nowhere, So but it sounds kind of snobbish, and it is kind of snobbish, but because I think both good teachers can create good students, and good teachers and bad teachers can also create good students, and bad teachers can also create good students. So it's like, just because you come from a lineage that's not so well known or famous doesn't mean that you don't have skills, and just because you come from a lineage that's famous and well known doesn't mean you have good skills, if you get my drift.
I've seen all of that happen. In fact, there are certain athletes out there who I think will succeed regardless of who their coach or who their teacher is. And these are obviously the outliers, but man, it's I see this a lot in mixed martial arts, especially guys who have a tremendous amount of talent, and they bring a certain amount of fame to a certain gym because obviously they train there. People want to know who trains this guy, because I want to be like them, and so much of it is just them.
Yes, I agree. I think at the end of the day, if you have like an incredible amount of raw talent, of course that's huge and super important. And if you want to reach the pinnacle of whatever you're doing, that's probably a requirement. But still, even those super talented guys, like if you take someone like Gary Tonin or Gordon Ryan or whatever, or Nicky Ryan, like that whole Danaher Death Squad, like for sure they're talented and they have amazing teachers. But at the end of the day, like they probably work harder than anyone else in jiu-jitsu.
Definitely.
Like Gary has his own school, and they travel, not hundreds of miles, but they travel from their city to New York every day, and then they train there 3 times, and then they come back and teach again. It's just like they didn't become the greatest by accident, there's a lot of things that kind
work,
of,
man. That is work. I mean, talent will take you to a certain level, but man, you need the work to bring you to the next one.
And having amazing coaches and amazing facilities and an intense kind of support network around you also helps to elevate you and push you up, right? And then on top of that, competing regularly and having people challenge you and show you where your weaknesses are, right? Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I ended up in HK. I ended up in Hong Kong, and I studied with Yip Ching, who was, yeah, probably the most famous guy. I mean, under in Wing Chun in Hong Kong at the time. And so I stayed there for the 4 months during the semester, and I loved Hong Kong, man. I loved Hong Kong. There's so much good things about Hong Kong that I could tell you. The people, the food, the language, the campus, the how the city is like built onto the mountains, and you can go hiking and swimming and surfing like all within an hour of the city. The kung fu was great, and it was a little bit tough though, because I always had this kind of pull inside of me, because on one hand I had all these like super cool people that I was hanging out with, that they're from Canada and Spain and Sweden and in India and Indonesia and all over the world. We had a really cool group of international students, and they're like, oh, let's go hang out, let's go to Lang Kwai Fong, and let's go party and all this kind of stuff. But then it's like, well, I want to go do Wing Chun every day, and I want to go training 2 times a day, and then I'm training on my own, and so it's like I kind of had to decide. It's like, do I want to be a partier who trains martial arts sometimes, or do I want to be a martial artist who parties sometimes? So that's like a pretty important distinction that I kind of decided pretty early on that I wanted to be a martial artist who was social and partied a little bit sometimes too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I did my 4 months there with Yip Ching. Super cool. Lots of good experience. Met lots of good people. And then I did kind of like the mainland China journey. And all my Hong Kong friends were kind of freaked out. They're like, oh, you don't go to the mainland. Don't go to the mainland. It's dangerous there. You're going to get robbed. They're all liars. And they're like, I'll say that, like the Hong Kong. Yeah. If
this is a side of the culture I was completely unaware of.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Having spent most of my time in mainland China.
Yeah. That's a thing, like between like, let's say like HK and Taiwan and China, like these different regions or whatever. Like there's quite some cultural tensions and distinctiveness between them. Like, for example, if you ask a typical Hong Kong person, are you Chinese or are you Hong Kongese? I think the large bulk would say, I'm Hong Kongese, I'm not Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
And there's quite a lot.
If you ask the mainlanders, are they Chinese? They'll say, of course
they're Chinese. Yeah, of course they're Chinese. Yeah. But if you ask like the Hong Kong side, well, they're not so eager to jump on the boat. And yeah, they have kind of their own, like, I mean, racist sounds kind of harsh, but I mean, it's like stereotypes basically, but that's what racism is stereotypes, right? So they have like their stereotypes about the mainlanders,
Every culture has this, especially the bordering ones.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so Hong Kong's kind of like, it's like a little tiny island against this huge, mass of the Chinese mainland, and they're kind of struggling to maintain their, identity and their culture and all this stuff. And so Hong Kong had the handover where they were kind of given back from the British to the Chinese in 1997. And I think just a few years ago there was like quite a lot of protests and like, oh, we want our freedom and all this kind of stuff. I don't remember if you remember that from I think it was 2014, maybe 2013, going back a few years. But anyways, yeah, so there's quite some distinction and difference between Hong Kongers and mainlanders, and they kind of warned me like, oh, be careful, those dirty mainlanders, they'll try to cheat you and steal, and they'll trick you and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, whoa, oh man, the mainland sounds scary. I don't know if I should go. But I ended up going to this kind of kung fu retreat with my good friend Mark. And he was from the U.S. and we met in Hong Kong, and we ended up going to Shandong province, and I think the name of the place is Kun Yushan Martial Arts. So basically, it was kind of like a Shaolin temple kind of thing, but it was much more foreigner friendly, and probably a couple notches down in terms of intensity.
Okay.
Which.
But it was like a monastery style?
Kind of. Like there's dormitories and there's a gymnasium, and it was like way away in the mountains in Shandong. It's near a place called Yantai. I don't know the tones on that one. Yantai, I don't know. So it's Yantai right there, like right on the cross from the Korean peninsula there. And anyways, yeah, so I was there for 3 months, and I did like Shaolin, I did Sanda, I learned the staff and the sword and the chain whip. Oh man, the chain, have you ever played with the chain whip?
You know, I have not. That's a weapon I've never picked up.
It is a super, super cool weapon. So my shifu, not sifu, because sifu's Cantonese, so I had to say shifu. My shifu, he, like, I was one of his favorite students, and he said I trained harder than anybody else, and da-da-da-da-da, which is pretty cool. And anyway, so he kind of took me a little bit off, and he started to teach me this chain whip. And it's super cool and difficult and very dangerous. In fact, kind of like nunchucks,
Yeah,
kind of like
nunchucks.
Yeah. So basically, it's like a long piece of steel, right? And it's divided into segments, and each segment is, I don't know, 4 inches long or so, and they're connected by little rings. And at the end, there's kind of like a heavy dart. So it's like if the other ones are, say, the width of my finger, or like maybe something like that. This one was maybe 2 fingers, or maybe even 2.5 at the base, and then it came to a point, right? So I guess the idea was like in battle or whatever, right? You can whip it around, and then you kind of connect it to your body, so it like you whip it around your head, and then it springs forward at the other guy. You spin it around your leg, and it's anyway.
It shoots out straight.
Yeah, it shoots out straight,
dart.
depending on like
Okay.
what body appendage you kind of wrap it around, and then it'll fire out. It's super complicated and difficult to learn.
That's a weird weapon.
Yeah, and like it has almost similar motion patterns as a staff, right? So you kind of do a staff, you can go backwards where it like comes up from under your armpits, or you go downwards.
Now, was this originally devised as a weapon?
Yeah.
There's a lot of traditional martial arts
yeah,
weapons
yeah,
were
yeah.
originally like farming tools that were modified or appropriated.
I'm honestly not so super sure about that, but I'm pretty sure it is like a traditional Shaolin weapon. But I think it is obviously now it's more used as like a show and like as a performance, like kind of wushu type stuff, right? But it's still super, super cool to learn. So basically, on the end part, there's like kind of a little flag, and just about yay big. And when you like spin it around in the air, it makes this like it makes just like a really cool sound, like right. And yeah, it's really difficult to learn. So it's like when you spin it, you can like put your head like in the path, and like spins around your head and like winds around, and then you change sides and it unwinds, and like you keep it going in these like crazy motion patterns stuff. Anyway, super cool. So yeah, I did that for 3 months, and they also had Wing Chun there as well, actually. But it was like this mainland Wing Chun, so it wasn't quite what I was used to. Their punches were like really circular, and their chi sao, sticking hands, was quite strange to me personally, because I hadn't experienced that before.
Are there a lot of different branches of Wing Chun?
Oh man, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, the same like any martial art. I guess the kind of history of it is it was like, or the legend, so to speak, it was developed in the Shaolin Temple by one of the female Shaolin monks. So she was like, obviously not as strong and powerful as the male monks. So she needed a way to counter their fighting techniques in a more economical and kind of intelligent way. And so she kind of created this style by fusing like white crane, which is a style of kung fu, and then like snake style, which is like the kind of straight line attacks. And so it kind of combines these two different styles of kung fu. And then it was further developed and added to down there, and then someone added weapons, and someone added the long pole, and then somehow it made its way to the south in Foshan, which is where Yip Man was. I think he was born, or that's where he became prominent at least. And then he moved to Hong Kong and started teaching, right? Yeah, but for sure, like even now in modern day Wing Chun, I mean, it's much the same like BJJ or like any kind of community like that. You have like this camp, and then you have like 10th Planet, and then you have Gracie, you have Gracie Baja, you have Atos, and then you have the Danaher Death Squad. I mean, there's kind of camps and lineages, and they have varying agreements and disagreements with each other, and there's
so
there's
much
drama,
politics, yeah.
and but one thing I really like about jiu-jitsu, particularly over kung fu, is that when people trash talk in jiu-jitsu, something actually happens. You know, like
exactly, because you can get on the mat and you can test it. Nobody has to die. I mean, it's kind of like you fight to the death, but nobody has to die.
But nobody has to die. It's kind of nice, right? So, you know, if Gio Martinez and who was it? He just had a not the high SM reader, but he just had a match with Nicky Ryan, right, a little while ago. And I wouldn't say they like trash talk each other per se. Who's a trash talker? AJ Agazarm, you know that guy? And he's like from Florida, and he's a bit of a trash talker. He was in ADCC last year.
Okay.
And he made it to the finals against who was he in the finals with? Not Bushesho. It's one of the smaller guys. Anyway, so he trash talks, and you know, and then a match happens, and you see who's better. You know, it's like, but in kung fu and traditional martial arts, you don't really have that kind of quality control. You know, and you don't really get to see whose kung fu is really good. Even just like a chi sao match, which is kind of like a sticking hands thing, which is typically like a training tool, kind of like pushing hands, Tui Shou. But even in Tai Chi, like they can have Tui Shou matches, you know, like they can see whose base is more stable, who's able to absorb and redirect the energy more effectively, right? But in Wing Chun, we can't even have that, right? Because the idea is that like if we had these kind of matches, like people would die and eyes would be gouged and like, you know, there'd be blood everywhere and corpses, you know. But I think,
and there's also the cultural element of in China of saving face. It's so important here.
Absolutely.
So if even if there was one of these battles and nobody died, it would be
awful. Oh my God.
It would be awful, man.
Because people would get embarrassed but honestly, I mean, when a little bit later on, I ended up going to Germany and living there and studying kung fu and jiu-jitsu full time for a year. It was amazing. I love Germany, especially Döners. I don't know if you ever had a Döner. It's like a little German kind of Turkish fusion thing, like a hamburger, but with pulled pork.
Oh wow!
Yeah, super super nice. Anyway,
sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I really
sorry, vegan friends.
I really wanted to take competition, like the idea of competition from jiu-jitsu that we have, where there's reality checks, right? There's consequences, and there's a distinctive winner and loser. And even if there's not a distinctive winner and loser, there's still a test. There's a trial, right? I mean, if we could take that idea and bring it to Wing Chun, it would be huge. It would be huge. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people who love Wing Chun and who genuinely like to practice it. They like to do it. They believe that it works. But we don't really have a forum or a format that we can compete under. Because like kind of there's, when you chi sao with someone, like when you train together Wing Chun, if you're from like a different school or if you're from the same school or whatever it is, there's kind of like a subtle agreement where it's like you agree to be cool and I agree to be cool and we're both cool. And if you hit me, that's okay. And if I hit you, that's okay. Like we're not trying to break each other's noses or gouge each other's eyes out or like do like knee in the balls and all this kind of stuff. There's like this kind of a social contract that we have with each other, right?
Okay.
But when it comes to competition and like, oh, mine is better than yours or my style is better than your style, I think it's tough to keep people on that kind of a social contract. And typically, one of the big criticisms that people have of Wing Chun competitions is like it just turns into like a punching fest, right? Like, so we're doing our chi sao stuff, we're doing our sticking hands, and people just like, and just like start punching like wild animals.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot on the few occasions where I've seen Wing Chun practitioners spar live. Often it starts out looking nice and crisp, and you see the forms, and then it falls apart and turns into bad boxing in a little bit.
Yeah, it's. And I think that's a symptom of a lot of different things. I think one of the things is that typically traditional martial artists don't spar enough, if they do at all. And the bigger issue is that they don't spar with other styles.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you sparring with your training partners and your training mates is one thing, right? But the thing is like you're both under the same umbrella, right? Like I know the same techniques that you know. Maybe you know them better, or maybe I know them better, but they're still the same techniques. And you're coming at each other with this kind of almost like a noise canceling thing. You know, it's like you cancel out each other. Where you can really start to test and see if your techniques work is when you start to practice and train with other styles, right? So it's like if you're a traditional martial artist and like let's say, okay, let's take my example, right? Say you do Wing Chun and you don't spar, okay, well, you're screwed then. I mean, if you just do the forms and some applications, I mean, maybe just do it for fun, and that's okay too. But if you only spar with people from your own school, that's okay. But it's not as good as sparring with someone from another school, because I think the social contract between those people is a little bit different. And like, let's say, for example, even like, let's say we're training partners and we both train at the same school. It's like so I think subconsciously, if you're like, say you're feeding me punches, right? Like, so I get to practice my techniques, you're giving me pressure and stuff. Like subconsciously, you secretly, not secretly, but you subconsciously want me to succeed because you want our techniques to be effective and you want to believe that what we do works. So it's like there's this kind of subconscious thing that happens when you train with someone from the same school doing the same art. It's like, okay, I feed you punches and I give you pressure, but subconsciously I want you to succeed. So I won't follow up, or I won't be as creative, or I mean, even if it's a set thing like a 1-2, like you see guys training and they leave their punches like hanging in the air, like ha, and then you block that and they're like, oh good, he blocked it, and then I can go with my 2. Oh, okay, now he blocked that. Oh man, oh, the technique's so super effective. Wow, awesome. You know, like there's this kind of subconscious current that connects us both under the same umbrella. You know, like we both want each other to succeed. So when you spar with someone, or when you train with someone from another school or another style, even in a friendly way, it's like he doesn't give a damn if your techniques work or not, right? Like if this guy punches you and you can't block it, well, that's your fault, right? Like he's not invested in your style. You're invested in your style,
exactly.
Right?
He's an outsider. He's the other guy.
Right. But I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like it's not like he has ill will towards you or ill will or ill intent, right? Besides a sparring match, but it's like he's not invested in your style. You're invested in your style. So I think having that breadth of people to spar against is absolutely critical if you want to develop like real functional techniques, right? Or else, like I think a lot of MMA guys and like kind of combat martial art guys, they talk about traditional martial arts artists living in kind of an echo chamber. Right? Yeah. So it's like you only train with your style, you only listen to your style, you only work together with your own school, you don't go outside of your school, and you only like you're reinforcing your own dogma and your own concepts, right? So it's like exactly that. It's like an echo chamber or like a bubble, you know, like you live in a bubble. And it's like
people love that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like that's a human thing, isn't it? It's like you live like whether it's like your book club or it's like your political party
or the YouTube channels you subscribe to.
How dare you?
I've had so many people come on the channel, and I appreciate everybody who watches the videos or listens to these podcasts and whatnot, but sometimes they'll just say, I love this channel because it's like hearing my own thoughts echoed with somebody else's voice. And I'm like, that's great that you're listening, but I'd love to have people just challenge, you know, their preconceived notions and develop as humans.
Yes. Yeah, so anyways, we can just skip a little bit forward there. So I went to Hong Kong, I went to mainland, came back to Hong Kong, wasn't super happy with the Yip Ching because all they did was Chi Sao. That's it, just Chi Sao and forms. And to me, that's not an effective way to train a martial art. There's no pressure, no bridging.
For those not familiar with that term, Chi Sao, how would you describe that?
Yeah, so Chi Sao, basically, if you can imagine, so I think everybody kind of understands what Tui Shou is, right? Pushing hands. So pushing hands is an exercise where we, essentially we're both connected by our arms and we try to stay stable, and I try to push you and disturb your base, and you try to push me and disturb my base. But it's done on like kind of a linear-ish plane, right? Kind of a flat surface. So Chi Sao, aka sticky hands, is a similar kind of exercise, but I would say it's much more focused on combat and control. So these are the two big things, and I think that's the big thing that distinguishes Wing Chun from other martial arts, and particularly like combat martial arts like boxing or Thai boxing or whatever. It's like our idea is that when we strike, we want to be simultaneously safe, and we want to be in control of the other person. Because like let's take a contrast with boxing, for example. Not that I don't like boxing, because boxing's great. when I punch in boxing, I stay at a distance because I want to hit you. But when I hit you, I don't control you. I don't have contact with your body. It's like I go in, boom, boom, boom. I do my combination, then I go out, boom. Then we're bouncing, we're on a distance. I go in, I do my combination, and I go out, right? So it's like it's an enter and an exit, an enter and an exit.
Yeah, boxing outside the pockets, right? That,
yes.
Wing Chun is inside of the pocket almost exclusively.
Well, I mean, I think that's our ideal distance because I think ideally, and that's a word, right? That we use a lot, is ideally what we want is to be in contact is to be in contact with our opponent so that we can use our sense of touch to inform us about what to do. Because I guess our idea is that if I use my eyes in a fight and I'm at this kind of a close distance where basically I can use two hands to touch your shoulders with my elbows bent, that's our ideal distance. If I'm here, my arm is a straight line, and I can't use my lower arm to influence your limbs in any way, right? We come in this kind of a distance, right? And kind of the typical Wing Chun criticism of boxing is like, if you learn boxing, like I punch and then you punch, we both can punch each other, right? But our idea is that it's like we use a low elbow punch because our punches are supposed to be like a wedge. So it's like, and if you know a little bit about Bruce Lee, that's essentially what he based his art on, which is Jeet Kune Do, if you translate it, is the way of the intercepting fist, right? So our idea is that when a punch is coming towards us, we don't want to, like, I don't want to move my head, right? I don't want to move my head because my head is slower than a punch. I don't want to build a wall. Because if I build a wall, or I don't want to only build a wall. Like I don't want to block a punch like this, which works well with boxing gloves, but not so well.
Yeah, by build a wall, you mean cover up, right?
Yes, cover up. That's right. I'll build a cover. And I think the other traditional martial arts, their blocks prove to be ineffective in some circumstances. So it's like if I do this kind of karate block, right, in to out or up to down or down to up, because it's kind of two-dimensional, right? It's like a flat plane. Yeah. So you're coming with a straight line, and I intercept with a flat plane. So I think our idea, so it's like one arm does one action, right? You punch me, and I defend with one arm. So it's like you have one action, I have one action. But our idea, I think it's a little bit smarter than that, but more difficult to execute for sure, is that our punch simultaneously defends and attacks at the same time. So it's like if there's a punch coming forwards towards me, and I do a block, then I meet it kind of at a perpendicular angle, right? But my idea is that I create like a triangle, and my triangle goes forward and splits your punch off, defending it, and at the same time I try to punch. So that's like our ideal punch, right? And that's kind of like a simplified ideal of Wing Chun, right? So we have simultaneous attack and defense, and we can also simultaneously use both of our arms, right? Because basically we don't generate power the same way as, say, boxing or Thai boxing with the rotation of the body and turning of the hips, right? Our power comes from our elbows being low and the upper back, actually. So it's like we drive the punch forwards from our elbow, and that idea, it's kind of like a wedge or like a split, like we're trying to split the power. Yeah. But back to Chi Sao there. So Chi Sao is an exercise where we deal with pressure, right? So you're trying to hit me in a certain kind of sense. So you're trying to hit me, but at the same time, you're always trying to be safe when you do it. Because if you just let's say we're doing Chi Sao closely here, and I just open my hand, like I open my elbow and extend forward, there's all this space here on the inside that I just gave to you.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what Jack Dempsey would describe as a impure punch, which is kind of interesting because have you ever read Jack Dempsey's book?
Jack Dempsey, I'm not familiar with
fighting.
It.
Well,
no.
he was a boxing heavyweight champion back in the year 1919, and a few decades on from that till he lost his title to Jean Tooney in the 1930s, I think it was. But he wrote this scathing critique of boxing technique that he saw in gyms around him in this book. And it was like 6 things that he absolutely hated that the boxing community was doing. And I read through it and I was like, I don't know what that is. 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 And so I read through the book and I watched his training, and a lot of it looked really familiar. I was like, where have I seen this before? And I realized these are like concepts from the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I looked up my copy of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and I see like these drawings Jack Dempsey has, these drawings Bruce Lee had, and they're shockingly similar in their theory and execution.
Yeah. And funny enough, too, if you watch some of Bas Rutten's videos, he always talks about, or he not always, but he talks about keeping the elbow low when he punches, and he punches on a 45 like this, right? He doesn't do this kind of open arm extended punch, right?
Right.
If you watch, he talks about bringing the power up from the ground through the hips, through the low elbow and forwards, and having the knuckles on a 45-degree angle like this. So we punch this way or this way. Both can work, right? Depends on whether you're on the inside gate or you're on the outside gate, and you sink the elbow in. So, but yeah, so that I think the theory behind that to me makes a lot of sense, but it's difficult to execute for sure.
Right.
And one thing my German Sifu talked about quite a lot. So that's now we've come to Shanghai. So I went to Hong Kong, I went back to Canada, and then I was like, well, I want to go back to Asia. So I ended up coming to Shanghai, right? And the first 6 months I was in Shanghai were super tough, super tough. I came here for an internship and in landscape architecture.
Right.
And but again, I just wanted to get back to Asia, and they offered to pay for my flight, they paid for my room and board, and they gave me a salary. So I was like, man, what do I got to lose, you know? So anyways, but I came here, and man, I didn't know a single person in Shanghai, and I lived kind of in the outskirts, like up north near Baoshan.
Yeah.
Do you know where Tongji Daxue is? Tongji University?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, well, if you look at Shanghai like a clock, it's kind of like, I can just tell you on line 8. Like if you follow line 8 up that way, there's a road called Sipinglu. There's a station called Sipinglu, and there's Tongji University just there. So it's quite a bit out of the city. And anyways, I was working in a Chinese company, and 2 people spoke English, and there's no way that I was anywhere near prepared for the amount of work or the amount of overtime that I would have to work as a designer coming to and working in China. Like, man, we would work 6 or 7 days a week, and working from 9 in the morning until 11, 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. was normal.
Oh, wow.
Was normal. And I thought I was prepared for work, and I thought I was prepared to live in another country because I'd done it in Hong Kong, right? But in Hong Kong, I had the students. I had the whole network of people there that are just ready to make friends and hang out and be cool, you know? But I came to Shanghai. I didn't know a single person. I had no idea how to like make friends and hang out. And so I think I went about the first 6 months without having a single friend.
Wow.
And it was totally brutal, man. It was totally brutal.
I imagine.
Yeah. But eventually I started to make friends, and I met some kung fu people and, you know, this kind of stuff. Because, I mean, I never lived in a big city before, you know? Like, I didn't know that it was normal to go out with alone and like just to meet people and hang out. Like, I thought like if I went out alone, people would like laugh at me and stuff. Like, it's so stupid to think that now, you know? But it's kind of true. Like that, I mean, that's what I thought, which is insane.
Again,
but
it's shocking what we believe until we experience the contrast.
Yes. So anyway, so I ended up meeting this German guy, and he had a kind of a Wing Chun school here, and and he was quite good. Yeah, his Chisao was super good and very convincing. He had done Brian. I think you met
yes,
Brian, right?
I know Brian.
Yeah, he's a character.
Absolutely a character.
Well loved by everyone for sure, right? Wink, wink. And
he is an intense dude, man.
And it was cool though, because he had done 15 years of Thai boxing before he started Wing Chun.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, that's impressive. Like, you did 15 years Thai boxing and you stopped studying Thai boxing to start Wing Chun. So like his...
Yeah, you don't see that very often.
Yes.
People going from a highly competitive, proven combat sport to something that is so often, especially in this internet age, often mocked like Wing Chun. And it just had me scratching my head like, what's this guy's deal?
Yeah, I mean, I thought
he's got to know something about this.
Well, I mean, one would imagine. And when Brian talked about it, he just talked about being in love with... Wing Chun just being a smarter system, just a smarter, more efficient, effective self-defense, you know, martial art. And he kind of sold me on that, you know. So I trained with him for 3 years, And again, I think I got lucky in some ways because for sure the Wing Chun that we did was not the best, and we had a lot of problems with our school in terms of the curriculum and stuff, and he kind of, he just basically cowboyed everything. Which is fine. I mean, whatever, like if it did the job, and he wasn't really under any, specific lineage or whatever, or he didn't have like the teaching degree and this and that, but he knew how to fight and he knew how to spar. And
one thing I noticed about Brian that I don't see with a lot of traditional martial artists is he was super athletic, like a really strong guy. And my biggest critique about traditional martial arts, I would say, is, and I made a few videos about this, traditional martial artists tend to be terrible athletes.
I think I've seen that video.
Whereas it's, fighting is one of the most athletic things we could possibly do. And so, when I met Brian, it was like, again,
doesn't
that's
fit the mold.
Something else that's different about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, we trained pretty hard. I don't think we trained at like champion level training, which, I mean, okay, which kind of a champion, world champion or local champion or whatever. But once I started doing jiu-jitsu and I went full on jiu-jitsu, I reached another level of training. But up until this point, it was the most intense. So, I mean, we had a quite rigorous kind of warm-up routine where we would do like, dozens of push-ups, pull-ups. We had TRXs, and we do all that stuff. And I think he was good at making the students tough. We had lots of kettlebells, and we had punching bags, like those kind of Wing Chun bags, whatever, all over the walls. And I remember putting, those like weighted, those like wrist bags or whatever that you can put on your wrist. I remember I would take like 3 of those wrist bags. Each one is like 2 kgs or whatever. And I would just wrap them around my arms. So my arms were like this big and like this big. And I would stay after class. I'd stay after class and just punch on those bags like an animal, like just as long as I could do it. And then I'd rest, like, oh my God, I'm dying. And then I'd go again, like, rah, just trying to develop my punching power. And yeah, I overall, I think what we learned there was quite all right, and we trained it under real stress, and we trained it under as much intention as someone in the same bubble as you can give you, I think, which is reasonable. But I mean, definitely his kung fu and our kung fu lacked a lot of different things. We didn't focus almost at all on structure, body structure, and connection to the ground, which I think is particularly prevalent in that style, that like German style. It's called Wing Chun. Wing Chun. It's slightly different than Wing Chun.
Yeah, spelled with a T.
Yeah,
right?
Tsun. Yeah, Wing Chun. It's kind of like a special derivative by a certain master. When we kind of picked up, that's what we were studying. And yeah, it's particularly prevalent in those guys. So their philosophy is like they have the weight 100% on the back leg, which in some scenarios I think works pretty damn well. Let's say, for example, like we're in a clinch or I'm in a very close distance and you try to sweep my leg or something, there's nothing there. So I can always readjust and then attack that opening, maybe attack your back leg that you just tried to sweep me with, the other one that you tried to sweep me with, attack your post, or get your back. And also it means that in the close distance that I can use my leg to check kicks at any time because there's never any weight there. So we have.
Yeah, it's when you shift your weight onto the lead leg that the sweep's happen.
That's exactly right. So I think in some ways that it really makes a lot of sense sometimes to have almost no weight on the front leg, even though you can apply pressure there, to not be committed to the weight there. So that's a pretty distinctive thing about that style. But most people who criticize that style will say that the stance is too high, it's not stable enough, and it's difficult to generate power from that. And I think those are all 3 legitimate criticisms. And now that I've started to study another Wing Chun style, which kind of has a very different idea about that kind of body structure stuff and emphasizes it a lot, in fact, also the way that they punch, like where they the Wing Chun punch from that style, Wing Chun, it's like they raise their arm and extend the arm fully. And a lot of people would say that it's not really rooted, and when the power goes out, it can only really come from the shoulder, and when the power comes back in, right, because whenever a force meets another force, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? The force goes into the shoulder and disturbs your body structure, right? And you can't really use the arm to absorb it very well because it's in a straight line. It's kind of locked out, right? So whereas most other people would say that you should always keep the elbow bent. So then the arm acts more like a spring in helping you to absorb it down into your spine and into your hips and into the ground. Whereas here, the pressure goes back into your shoulder. So it's not really the most efficient way to transfer the power into your body structure.
Man, there's so many different ways to punch, man.
Mm-hmm. So, but anyways, yeah, Brian, at his school, he had a lot of good things going. Like we did sparring with other styles, right? So first we started sparring within ourselves, of course, which is very normal.
And you've got some videos of this up on your YouTube channel, by the way, right?
Yeah. A long story short, basically, I got injured last November pretty severely doing jiu-jitsu, and it was like just a random injury, nothing really serious. I had a small tweak in my neck, and I took a week off, and then it was just like a cascade of injuries that just followed. My shoulders and my neck kind of froze up on me. My chest was like twitching and freaking out. I have a fractured rib that got re-fractured again from my muscles being tight around it, and I couldn't move, I couldn't walk. And then I had a pinched nerve in my lower back. But so basically it put me out of commission for 2 months. I couldn't move or do anything. I was in the hospital every 2 days. It was pretty brutal, man.
Wow.
And so I spent a few months recovering from that. And I had stopped doing Wing Chun for about 2.5 or 3 years and just focusing on jiu-jitsu because I love jiu-jitsu. But I wanted to get back to training, but I didn't think I was ready to get back on the mat again. So I was like, you know what? I had been thinking to myself, I was like, man, I kind of miss doing Wing Chun. Like, I kind of miss doing it, But like all my friends who'd done Wing Chun before, like they either left or they're not training anymore, or they got, a wife and, all this kind of stuff. So I kind of looked around a little bit, and there's a kung fu teacher here who's doing Wing Chun, but it's like vastly different from what I had done before, where there's like a super heavy emphasis on body structure and alignment and proper pressure, a wider stance, more stable, more powerful.
Right.
So anyway, once I started to get back into it, I was like, you know what? I should upload those videos, because there's so few videos of Wing Chun being used under pressure against a fully resistant opponent in sparring. Yeah. And I mean, first of all, there's few videos of that. But the videos that there are out there, like, it's just awful, right? Like, the dudes just get destroyed. And I was like, and I kind of went back and I watched my old sparring videos. And I was like, you know what? Like, it's not amazing. It's not perfect technique. Yeah. And it's not like a kung fu movie. But it's not that bad. I was
kind of surprised you uploaded them, because, this was from years ago. And obviously you're looking at this through retrospect, being a more experienced martial artist now, being able to see your mistakes and whatnot. But that was really cool to see.
Yeah, and I mean, basically my idea was that I just wanted to first just get it out there that, okay, there is in fact footage, and there are people who have made Wing Chun work under pressure against a fully resistant opponent, not to an incredibly high degree, but to some degree of success, right? Like the first one, for example, that I posted was me against a Krav Maga fighter, and he'd done Taekwondo as well. And we had these kind of open sparring sessions at our gym, I think twice a month or maybe once a month. I think it was twice a month though, every 2 weeks. And, we would invite other Kung Fu schools. There's Praying Mantis Kung Fu. There's Sifu Anthony. I don't know if you met Sifu Anthony.
I have. What Kung Fu style does he specialize
in?
Praying Mantis,
yeah,
that's
Praying
right.
Mantis. It's actually quite similar to Wing Chun,
yeah,
but just maybe
he
a
shows
little
up
bit
to
more
my
old
MMA
school.
classes once in a while. Interesting guy.
Oh yeah, he's a funny guy. He's an actor as well. He was the referee in Yip Man 2.
That's right, he was.
Yeah. He looks a lot like you. You guys are both
He's
kind of bald.
Shaved head. Man, when you shave your head, you look like every other person with a shaved head, man. People are like, hey, you look like Jason Statham. You look like Bruce Willis. You look like Michael Jordan. I've actually heard that one, believe it or not.
Yeah, I can't believe that. So anyways, yeah, like I said, so we had these open sparring sessions at our school, which was pretty cool. And I don't know almost any other Wing Chun schools who do that, except for my first Sifu in Canada. And he would go to like the local kickboxing gym and take the guys there and, go have some good matches with them. But besides that, nobody does that.
Yeah.
And
there's so much risk, either real or
Oh,
imagined.
huge.
People think if we spar with some other school and we get our butts kicked, we're going to lose all of our students. We're going to be exposed or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I'll say about Brian, is that he was not afraid to challenge himself, and he was not afraid to challenge the students, and he believed in what he was doing, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the first couple times, like let's say for example, the first time we sparred with the praying mantis guys, it went okay, but there was some serious holes in our game that we saw, and there's like, damn, well, we got to work on that. Okay, well, and then the next time we sparred them, well, I got a bit better, and the same thing happened when the MMA guys came. The first time we sparred with them, it's pretty ugly. Like I won't upload those videos. Those are ugly videos. Like I remember there's this one guy in particular. He's really big. He was like the head bouncer at Mint. And
that's
Jesus.
a club in downtown
Yes,
Shanghai.
sorry, it's a club in Shanghai, one of the biggest, most famous ones. And he was like the head bouncer, head of security. And Jesus, he must have been about 100 kgs or 95 kgs, maybe more. And like just a jacked guy. And he did MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff. And we had one big guy who was like quite. Anyway, he was like kind of a dorky looking dude and had a bit of a belly, but he was like our heavyweight,
Yeah.
And he sparred with, this guy's name was Dana. He sparred with Dana, and Dana just.
Oh, I know Dana.
You know Dana?
Dana Whitmore, yeah.
Yeah, Dana just wiped the floor with him, and he gave up after 30 seconds or something. And then okay, so Brian was like, okay, Dana, that's enough, that's okay. Okay, who's gonna fight next? Because we didn't have any other heavyweight guys, right? And I was like, oh, Steve, well, I'll spar this guy. And Steve was like, no, Tyler, he's way too big. No, don't spar him. I was like, no, I'll spar him. And because Dana had his gloves on, he his boxing gloves, and he had his boxing gloves on, and I was like, oh, I'll just put on a helmet. I'll be okay. I won't get a broken nose or anything. And Dana proceeded to just like knock me across the room, man. It was brutal. Yeah. So I mean, because he's a big, strong guy, and he's got heavy punches from
resilient, man. I've seen him. I saw him do this exhibition fight. His opponent did this wild spinning back fist across his face and spinning back kick, heavy shots, and Dana just like shrugged it off like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Like
Resilient
anyway, he's
guy.
a tough dude. Only respect to Dana, and his grappling was good as well. But we didn't do any ground fighting this first time that they came to visit us. But yeah, like if maybe someday I'll upload that video, but probably not, because it looks really bad. Like it looks like those other videos, those other videos you see of like Wing Chun versus whatever, boxing or MMA. It looks pretty bad. And also the other fight that I had with Pierre, who is the guy who's more my size, that first time that they came, basically he adapted to my style super quickly, and he was able to like keep distance. So when I would come in with my punches, he would just like fade, and then like hit me from range, and like he basically tore me up, right? But the second match that we had was much better from our perspective, right? Because we learned from all that stuff, and we're like, well, we kind of got our butts kicked that first time, so okay, well, let's see, how do we make it better, right? How do we adapt? How do we understand, right? Like, how did they beat us, right? What was it about them that beat us, right? So they had, better distance, better they were more dynamic, changing levels up and down, in and out, right there.
And I imagine coming from a Wing Chun school, one of the biggest problems would probably be just being able to close the distance.
Yeah.
Because the most dangerous time in a striking contest is closing the distance. When
Absolutely.
You're moving toward your opponent, that is where the knockout shots happen.
That's the biggest challenge for a Wing Chun guy. It's like if we can get through that distance, what we call bridging, right? So for us, a bridge is anytime our hand touches our opponent's hand. That's a bridge. So it can be a long bridge, can be short bridge, can be double bridge, can be outside bridge, can be inside bridge, and then inside outside. So we have kind of a variety of different bridges. But yeah, that time when we come from the outside their range to inside their range, it's the most dangerous time, right? And for us, it's like we don't want to stay kind of just on the edge of their range, like where they can kind of hit us without stepping. So kind of our basic philosophy for fighting is like we want to be outside of their range or in past their ideal range, right? Because maybe some might say like not in the pocket, but like long range strikes is like you're kind of about here, right? You're jabbing or you're crossing or you're hooking. So we want to be like inside of there where we're almost too close to use those long range punches, and then we can start to use our tactile responses, right? Because if I use my eyes to watch your fists, first of all, the fists are too fast.
Man, if
you
you're
can't
looking
watch.
at fists, you're going to get punched.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically what we learn is like you watch the elbows and you watch the shoulders, but only with the peripheral vision. You should watch the center of the neck, or maybe even a little bit lower on the chest, right? That way I can see your feet, I can see your shoulders, and I can see your elbows. If you try to watch the fists, you're finished. It's too fast. You can't watch it.
Right.
And then my eyes have to send the signal to my brain, and my brain has to send the response back to my hands, and then my hands have to act, which is like kind of a long process, right?
Yeah.
But if you can touch your opponent, then you can start to use that tactile response, which can almost kind of cut out the brain, right? Where it's like that's part of what Chisao is. It's like kind of trying to program your arms to react to certain kind of inputs, right? So if someone pushes at me this way, okay, what do I do? If someone pushes at me this way, what do I do? If someone gives me this kind of a pressure, how do I react, right? And we're always trying to have like a spring forwards. So as soon as an opening happens, we shoot forwards and strike to the vital targets, right? Whether it's the nose, the eyes, the throat, or whatever. But I mean, that's another story. So that's kind of the basic idea. Is like we want to be close enough to not only hit, but also to control and be safe. Which is, it's a pretty tall order. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's a tall order. It's tough, But I feel like I feel like myself personally, I'm definitely making progress. And specifically with this new school that I'm training at, they have their own set of issues that they're kind of trying to work out,
Don't we all, though?
I mean, it's a little bit different arrangement, and their clientele is a little bit different as well, So the Sifu, he kind of has to cater to that crowd, right? So they don't really do any sparring. They definitely don't spar with other schools. They focus a little bit more on the internal side, which is what I said I was lacking, right? Like kind of body structure, proper alignment, being stable, being powerful, and being able to generate serious power from a short distance, right? So luckily for me, those are all the kind of things that I was kind of lacking before, right? Maybe before I was very mobile. I could strike and defend from more or less anywhere. But yeah, I definitely did not have that kind of grounding and stability that I needed. And I think that also plays into like takedown defense and this kind of stuff, right? Because if your stance is high, right? If you're up here and you're pivoting and turning and your hips are kind of elevated, you're going to get taken down. There's no question about it, right? Like you're going to get double-legged, you're going to get single-legged, you're going to get thrown. I mean, whatever it is. If someone gets close to you and you're not stable, you don't have a powerful, solid base, you're done. You're getting thrown, right? And I mean, then a lot of Wing Chun guys say, well, if someone takes me down, I'll just do that. I'll do the elbow in the back of the head, But funny enough, I watched what did I watch recently? One of those very early UFCs. Because I was having
people actually had the opportunity to try these things.
Yes, and I was funny because we're kind of talking because I train at Absolute MMA, and I was kind of talking with one of the coaches there, and he was talking. I mean, basically, it's like kind of the classic combat martial arts versus traditional martial arts kind of debate or whatever. It's like, all traditional arts suck, they're useless, like you can't use them in a real fight, they're not useful for combat, it's only for like health and this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of approach, or this is the kind of thing they're espousing. And my counter to that was, well, before modern martial arts evolved, the grapplers destroyed just the same the boxers, just the same the kickboxers, just the same the Thai boxers. All those guys got destroyed, right? It's not only and the traditional martial arts got destroyed too, right? But the difference is that the Thai boxers, and the other combat martial arts, they evolved, whereas the traditional martial artists, not so much, right? So, and the example, I'm sure you know this, my example that I used, what was the guy's name? I know for sure it was Dan Severn. Dan Severn and the Thai boxer. He was from the U.S. I can't remember what his name was.
Is that the fight where Dan Severn suplexed
He suplexed him
like
twice.
3 times?
Oh, man, he just destroyed it. He went in for a low single, got up, got behind him, wham, suplex. And I posted that video in the group. And then what was the next one? There was another Thai boxer. I can't quite remember. But anyways, yeah, the point was that all those strikers, they all got destroyed by the grapplers.
So that dude that Remco Pardoul beat with his elbows on the ground.
Yeah, it was the judo guy. It was the Orlando with something with an M.
Like a monosyllabic last name, like Veit?
Meal or?
I don't remember. Orlando was his first name.
Orlando Meat. M-I-E-T. I think it's Orlando Meat. And that's exactly what it was. So it was a wrestler, Dan Severn, and then a judoka, judo player, who was Pardum?
Remco Pardoul.
Remco Pardum, yeah. And that was my 2 examples, right? And this Thai boxer, like, he trained for 4 years in Thailand, and he'd fought in the big cities and stuff. I mean, a legit Thai boxer as far as I know, yeah. But as soon as the judo guy got his hands on him, man, he was finished. Right, he got thrown. He got he did that hand around the back takedown where you basically sit down and the guy kind of goes
just
around.
Squashed him a little bit.
Yeah, and then just rode him and gave him a downward elbow, and he was finished. Right. And then, yeah, I mean, if you look at the kung fu matches from then too, like the Wing Chun guy, I think there's only been one Wing Chun guy in the UFC. He was just like a big fat guy, and like he fought this like jacked up wrestler, and the wrestler just took him down and destroyed him. I mean, there's no surprises there. Although I do recall what's that guy's name? The Big Daddy. Do you remember this match where the wrestler is like this?
Gary Goodrich?
Yeah, Big Daddy Goodrich. And he fought this like jacked up wrestler, and the wrestler was just completely reckless and just ran in for a takedown. And he come from Kuk Sool Won. That was Gary Goodrich's style. And Gary basically got him in like kind of a crucifix.
Yeah.
And Gary just destroyed him with these elbows, right?
The elbows to the head, yes.
Yeah. So that was like, well, I mean, it can work. It can work. Like the stand-up arts, they can work in some scenarios, but maybe the guy was a bit reckless. But the point that I wanted to make was that Wing Chun guys always say, right? Oh, I'll use my elbows if he comes in. And this guy tried exactly that against Dan Severn, right? The kickboxer, Thai boxer there, right? He tried these downward elbows, and Dan just plowed through him. Plowed through him, yeah. And he was already on his back foot, right? He's on his back foot. He's going, and these elbows don't do anything, right? If you're already kind of off balance, Dan just got behind him, souffled him or suplexed him. I think it was twice, maybe 3 times, and the guy was just done, right? He just and Dan didn't even know how to choke, barely, right? Like he just kind of scraped his hand under his throat and it was like, it just like crushed him with his hips in or whatever. Yeah, I love those early UFC matches, man. It's super educational. Every martial artist should watch those early UFC matches.
Oh, absolutely,
man.
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I have a ton of subscribers who ask me questions about dealing with injuries, and you mentioned you went through a series of pretty serious ones a while back. How did now? Obviously, you weren't feeling great about that. I remember you posted on social media about like just feeling really down about it. But how did you deal with that? How did you come back from that?
Yeah. I explained a little bit about the injury. Like I said, it basically came from nowhere, and essentially I didn't warm up for a roll, and we're supposed to have a warm-up roll with my partner, and he's a particularly strong and rather handsome guy named Roslin, and we had a good roll. But it was supposed to be a warm-up roll, but it didn't really go that way, right? So he kind of chased my neck and was quite heavy with his guard passing and kind of tried to finish a Darce quite intensely, but I managed to escape. But at the end of the day, I had like a tweak on my neck. I was like, I was at my friend's house playing video games, and I was like, man, my neck doesn't feel good, My
neck muscles are tightening up just listening to this.
Yeah, so anyways, so I was supposed to coach that night. I was supposed to teach that night at our old gym called Warzone.
Right.
R.I.P. And I decided to not coach because I was like, my neck does not feel good. And I ended up taking the whole week off. It's one of those things, it's like where you wake up in the morning and you start to get up out of bed, like you start to sit up, and then like you get like kinds of pins and needles down your back from up here. So I was like, oh, that's not a good thing. So I ended up taking the week off. And the weird part is, after a week of rest, that's when the real injury started. Just from nothing. Nothing. Yeah, super strange, right? So basically my shoulder and my back all started to tense up when I was walking home, when I was on the metro. And I had to walk home like this because I could not get my shoulder to drop.
It was just raised up.
It was just
like
raised.
that,
It just
all
stayed
by
there.
itself. Wow.
Yeah. And what I think the real symptom was that I was training too hard and I wasn't taking care of myself. Maybe not too hard, but I was training so intensely and I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't stretching. I wasn't warming up. I wasn't cooling down. I wasn't doing all those things that you need to do. And I was training 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yeah. So it was, and that's jiu-jitsu. Sorry, that's jiu-jitsu. I was training jiu-jitsu. And because I just love jiu-jitsu and it's awesome. And I wanted my skill curve to be steep, right? I didn't want a skill curve like this.
And you made some significant advancements in jiu-jitsu. Like when I first met you, you knew a little bit about jiu-jitsu, and now you're
purple
like
belt.
A purple belt, right?
Yes.
10th planet purple belt.
Yes.
Won a bunch of tournaments. Couldn't be more proud of you.
Thanks,
Congratulations.
Man. Yes, thank you. Yeah, when I first met Ramsey, I had been training at another martial artist's gym, and I think you guys know each other as well, Silas. So I was training MMA with him, and we had a catch wrestling coach.
Right.
So he came to coach at our gym, and funny enough, Kyle, who you just had on the podcast, he was kind of my first real jiu-jitsu coach. Right. And then so I had catch wrestling from Cole, and I had jiu-jitsu from Kyle. And then so I kind of they left the city and kind of went to Suzhou and whatever. So then I was kind of left to my own devices. So I came to see Ramsey, who is kind of the next best option. That is very well respected in the city, and has got great technique and has a lot of knowledge. And
blushing over here, man.
So yeah, I came to Ramsey and I studied. I think we did about 4 or 5, 6 months maybe before I went to Germany. Yeah. So basically, I came to Ramsey, and then I was digging everything. He was into all the same stuff as me. Like he played rubber guard and lockdown and twister, and he knew all the 10th planet terminology, dogfight, and all this stuff. So I was like, oh, this is so good, right? It's a brother from another mother, So we hit it off, and I think you helped me a lot as well with my takedowns, because I think that's something I'm still pretty lacking on, is my takedowns. But Ramsey's got he's just an encyclopedia of takedowns, wrestling.
That's something that the jiu-jitsu community at large,
as a whole,
just really needs to improve on.
Guilty. I love guard and I love leg locks, and I'm just so guilty.
Man, when your takedowns are better, everything about your jiu-jitsu gets better, because it puts you. You basically get to choose what position you start from.
I feel you. But I just love the saddle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to the injury. So right. So I was training super intense, and like Ramsey said, I'd competed a whole bunch. I had a whole bunch of championships at blue belt level, and I got a whole bunch of gold medals at home. It feels pretty awesome, which is another thing that's really unfortunate about Wing Chun, that we can't have that in some kind of a format. But anyway, so basically I was in bed for 2 months, and I couldn't move. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't get to the bathroom. This is so brutal. Like, I didn't eat for a week. I didn't eat solid food for a week, and I lost 10 kgs within the first week.
Wow.
Yeah. That bad. It was, I don't know if I've ever had anything close to as painful as that in my life. It was, I'll tell you guys this is actually kind of ridiculous. So my friends, they were kind of helping me out, right? Because I was just incapacitated completely, and I wasn't able to get up. So basically we had like a system, like a pipe that I would kind of pee into, and that pipe would drain into my bathroom, because I couldn't get up and go to the bathroom.
Oh man.
And we kind of like MacGyvered this like contraption.
Still better than a catheter, man.
Oh man, it was so bad. But yeah, that's just that kind of illustrates how bad it was. And but to be fair, like I started out with traditional Chinese medicine, and he's also a kung fu teacher, by the way. And he really helped me with my upper body problems. So like all those muscles locking up and being tight I told you about, in like 2 or 3 sessions, that was all gone, right? So he loosened up my shoulders, my chest, but my refractured rib, that took longer to heal, right? So after about a week, I started to feel a bit better. I was like, oh, I can move my shoulders again. I could start to stand up a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the real pain came. And that came from my hip, my left lower hip. And it started kind of in my butt, like my upper butt. And it kind of stayed there. And then, so I started looking online all over the place. It's like, oh, is it nerve damage? Is it sciatica? Is it piriformis syndrome, which is like where the nerve gets pinched by the muscles that are too tight and stuff. And so I kept going to the hospital after I got x-rays. I got x-ray upon MRI, upon CT scan. My hair started to fall out because of all the x-rays. Yeah, that was scary, dude. That was really scary. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up with like night sweats and just like covered in water. And then the next night I'd wake up with chills. And oh man, it was just the most brutal 2 months that I think I could imagine. And the worst part there's a couple parts that are really bad. I don't mean to piss and moan for everybody here. I'll try to keep it short.
It's cool.
But first, the doctors didn't know what was going on. No one could tell me what was wrong. Second, it felt like,
scariest
thing. That's scary. That's super scary. Second, I didn't know what was wrong, and it felt like it was getting worse.
Right.
Over time, which it wasn't, but it felt like it was.
Yeah.
And then right in the smack middle of this, about the 1 month part, I had to make a visa run. So I had to leave China because of my visa. And I had to so I took my friends gave me some painkillers because the regular painkillers wouldn't work. They didn't do anything. So, not morphine, what's the other one? Oxycontin. Right. So you're supposed to take like maximum one of those a day. So I ended up taking 2 Oxycontins in the morning, and then I wheelchaired myself to the airport, and I traveled to Korea in a wheelchair in horrible pain, and then I waited in Korea for 2 hours, and then I came back in a plane, horrible pain, and then I wheelchaired myself back home. And that was a mentally challenging episode. I'm very glad I don't have to do that again. But anyways, so the doctors didn't know what was going on. No one could tell me what was up, and I did endless scans and all this kind of stuff, and somehow magically, they did find the pinched nerve though after the MRI.
So it was a pinched nerve after all.
But it was a pinched nerve, but it wasn't behaving like a pinched nerve.
Oh.
So it looked like a pinched nerve physically, like in the scan, but the symptoms that were coming weren't that of a pinched nerve. Like typically in sciatica, like the pain goes all the way down your leg and you kind of get tingly in your foot and all this kind of stuff, but it was staying only like on the back of my butt cheek, and it was kind of moving around there. And the doctor said maybe it's because like I'm pretty strong and my skeleton was good, and so it like my spine was good, like it wasn't a slipped disc or anything, it wasn't a popped ruptured disc, because like my spine was all good. That's what they thought it was at first, but it didn't end up being that. But then somehow they suggested like, okay, we can inject your spine with this anti-inflammatory stuff directly, and that should take down the swelling, and hopefully that'll solve some of the things that are going on. Yeah. But somehow magically, after I think just before New Year's, my pain started to lessen and diminish.
Right.
And I had some really unfortunate episodes where I would like, maybe one day I was out around the city with my friends in my wheelchair, and I forgot to bring my painkiller with me, and I would just wind up like in an excruciating pain by the time we like went home, and it was just it was awful. But anyway, so somehow magically the pain just started to kind of get less, and one day I could start to put a little tiny sliver of weight on my leg, and the next day it was a little bit more. And then about a week later, I could walk with crutches.
Right.
And then about a week after that, I could walk without crutches. And it just kind of got better. So, I mean, the first time I could walk without crutches, I realized that I was walking, I had groceries in my hand, I was walking without crutches, or walking with crutches, and I just kind of realized that I wasn't really putting much weight on my crutches. I was kind of walking more with my foot. And I was in the middle of a kind of a crowded street, and I just kind of threw my head up to the sky, and I just started laughing because I was so happy. I was so happy. I was just like, this is the greatest moment of my life.
Man, it's the little things.
Yeah.
Well, actually, mobility, it's a huge thing, but we take it for granted when we can use it regularly. But man, when something's taken away like that, man,
Yeah,
it's
pretty
eye-opening.
It's very, you don't know how much you love something until it's not there. But anyway, yeah. So, but honestly, I'll tell you that itself was pretty tough. But I think the hardest part was coming back mentally and psychologically after the injury.
Oh, I imagine.
Because something I believe pretty strongly in is the idea of momentum, right? So I feel like during my training and my martial arts and whatever, like you build up a lot of positive momentum. So it's like, even if you don't want to do something, like let's say I didn't want to compete, but I had all this momentum behind me, like a train, like pushing me, like, okay, just go, like, go. And then, so you don't want to do it, but you just do it because you have this like positive force behind you. You have a community behind you. You have people behind you. They're expecting you to do this. They're kind of, elevating you and pushing you up. And I think, when I came out of the injury, not only did I lose my positive momentum, but I had built up a lot of negative momentum. Because man, there was nights when the pain was so bad, and I didn't believe it would get any better, and I was just like crying alone in my apartment, and just like totally hopeless, and like I lost all my direction. Like, man, my life is martial arts. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna have to start all over. It's something else. Like. And
the last thing you want is to, suffer another injury and go back there.
Oh right? Man, it's a really, really tough, man. It was a tough spot. So afterwards, it's like sometimes I would be positive, but then like it was like, I would say overall as a person, when I'm on my right path, like when I'm on my right self, I'm at my best self. I have a good routine, and I have a direction, I have a focus, I have a point that I'm trying to achieve. It gives me a lot of focus, and I can really work hard, and I'm quite determined, and I have a lot of perseverance, I think. But like when you lose your direction, and you lose your focus, and you lose your kind of belief or your goal, it's like everything becomes kind of muddy. Everything, it's like there's no path to follow. So I struggle with that, to find again, first the belief in yourself, and the belief that you will get better. And my friends were super supportive, man. They helped me so much. They gave me a place to stay. They gave me food. They gave me support. I mean, I had like Chinese mothers coming and like making soup for me, and like I had apartments that I could stay in, and I mean, like just the community of people I had around me. They would take me to the hospital, and when I couldn't move, and they'd go with me to the X-ray room, and man, it's really pretty unbelievable how lucky I am to have the people around me that I do. Because without my friends, I honestly don't know what I would have done. It's like I think I would have just had to suffer, like just suffer and suffer and suffer, and I don't know if it would have got better, because I also kind of believe that if you're negative and you're thinking negative things, it affects your body in a substantial way. Yeah, right. So
absolutely.
So anyway, it's after the injury, it's like I think before my injury, like I said, right, I was like a train, like a speed train, like just like a rocket, just like I hope going up, right? Right. But I had this injury, and then I lost my belief, and I lost my coaching, and I lost my job, and I lost all this stuff, and then after, it's like I got to pick up the pieces and figure out what am I going to do, so I struggled a lot with that, like first finding the motivation, or finding a goal, finding something to shoot for again, like just, am I ever going to be able to train again? Am I ever going to be able to do jiu-jitsu again? Am I ever going to be able to coach again? Am I ever going to be able to compete again? And so slowly over time, I would like train a little bit, and then I would like get hurt again. I was like, damn it. And I would train again after waiting a little bit, and then I get hurt again. Damn it. So it's like it's like you're kind of blind in a room and you're like feeling around, right? And you're like, and you touch something sharp and you're like, oh damn, I can't touch that thing. I gotta stay away from that thing. Okay, let's keep going. Okay. Oh, that's okay. I can do that. Okay. How about what's this? Oh, that's okay. I can do that. Oh, that's a sharp thing. I can't do that again. So, but I think I was really lucky. And there's this one friend of mine, and I always bitch to him, and he's like my main training partner. His name's Dean. Dean, you're out there. I love you, buddy. So in my dark times, because I don't like to complain to people. Like, I try to bring positive energy and positive thoughts. So I think another thing that happened to me is, like, I was a lot less social. Like, I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to talk with people. I didn't want to meet people.
Right.
Not because I don't like them, right? But because I didn't want to bring my negative energy and the way that I was feeling to those people. I didn't want to do that.
That makes total sense, man.
But what I didn't realize, though, is, like, when I go out and I see those people, it's much more likely that their positive energy and positive feelings and emotion and their love for me and my love for them would affect me in a much more positive way than my, shitty negative energy would affect them, So once I started being more social and I started reaching out to people and talking to people, that's when I really started to rebuild my positive momentum and my positive energy. And then I slowly started to believe in myself again. And I slowly started to, like, try new things and experiment in the gym and, try to do this exercise, try to do that exercise, even just a little tiny bit, slowly, step by step. And I'm still working my way through that now because, like you said, man, like, I cannot go through that again. I cannot go through that again. It was too brutal. So it's like, I'm trying to be much more careful. Now I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing stretching. I'm doing warm up. I'm doing cool down. And after every session, I do like 20 minutes, half an hour stretching. I stretch out my hips, stretch out my spine, stretch out my neck. I try to take much better care of myself. Yeah.
Right. So how much emphasis do you put on the warm up now?
I try to warm up a good 10, 15 minutes. Okay. And I've got a pretty decent routine from my coach, Ralph. He's a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he lives in Germany. He's German, and yeah, he's like he's a physiotherapist. He's a chiropractor. I think he even studied like natural medicine and stuff as well. He's also like a director. He's like an art salesman. Like he's
those 10th Planet guys, man. They're Renaissance people.
Yeah. So anyway, he kind of gave me a decent warm-up routine. He helped me a lot when I was in pain as well, because he has his own share of injuries and stuff. So I just try to focus on that. But for me, I think more important than even the warm-up is the stretching afterwards, because I think my problem came from the tension in my muscles and the tension on my spine, the tension on my back and shoulders. So I really try to just open up and relax and not necessarily increase my flexibility, but to relieve the tension in my muscles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one thing that stood out to me when I read Mastering the Rubber Guard for the first time. I think it was Mastering the Rubber Guard. Close to the beginning of the book, after Eddie Bravo has that whole spiel about how marijuana affected his life and whatnot, he starts talking about stretching. And he mentioned something that still stands out to me this day, and I use this concept every single day, which is grappling, especially from the guard, puts a lot of pressure on the spine and the back, and you don't really notice it or think about it until it gets bad.
Especially if you're getting stacked.
Yeah. So he recommended a series of stretches and whatnot, just really simple things. But man, those simple things make such a big difference.
I agree. Yeah, it's one thing to do jiu-jitsu and to use power and to kind of move forwards along your skill tree, but you really have to take care of yourself along the way. Because, I mean, like everyone says, I mean, jiu-jitsu, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you want to keep doing it like I do, I mean, I want to keep doing it when I'm 50, when I'm 60, when I'm 70, I hope, But you have to take care of yourself. You have to nurse your injuries, and you have to be smart. You have to be smart, man. You can't... I mean, I wish I was 20 again, and I could do my job, and then go to kung fu training, and then go to jiu-jitsu, and then come home and do more jiu-jitsu, and then wake up at 6 a.m. and do more jiu-jitsu. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I haven't totally given up on achieving a decent, reasonable level of skill. Like I know I'll never be Gary Tonin. I know I'll never be Gary Tonin, and that's okay. That's okay. For me, it's enough if I can achieve a decent, half decent level of skill, and maybe someday I can be a black belt, and maybe I can be a coach someday and share hopefully legitimate techniques and pass on knowledge to my students, to my future students. That's enough for me. And I mean, sure, maybe I can still compete here and there around Asia, but I don't know. I'll probably never be like a world champion or something, but that's okay.
Well, not with that attitude. No, I get it though. I get it, man. Our callings in life, if you will, it's not always about it's not about comparing yourself to somebody else. It's not about being, Gary Tonin or whoever. It's about being you, the best version of you.
Yeah.
It's not about being better than him. It's about being better than yesterday.
Yeah, I think so, man. I think martial arts can help us with that. I hope it can. And I don't know. In the end, I kind of feel like what martial arts is to me. It's what I was searching for when I was a young man, was basically a path to follow to master yourself or to improve yourself. When I was a kid, before I was into kung fu, actually, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I was really super keen to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to be in the military. I knew every single fighter jet that was like ever produced, and all like the missiles that they had, and the engines, and F-15, F-16, F-18, F-22, all the different configurations, and I was super obsessed with being a pilot. But I came to feel that I enjoyed too much my autonomy and my freedom, and I kind of realized like I don't really want to spend my life under someone else's control,
right?
And I don't want to spend it hurting other people, right? Like shooting guns and missiles and stuff, which is not necessarily what the military does all the time. Like they fly helicopters with aid, and they peacekeep and stuff. But
at the end of the day, though, it is the business of warfare.
It is. It kind of is, and more so in the U.S. than in Canada. But still, I mean, a weapon is a weapon.
Right.
And whether you use it for good or bad, I mean, it depends on who's wielding it. But I decided that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to follow that path. But I think the military is kind of like an obvious choice as like a path to achievement, or like a path to greatness. I guess you can kind of say something if you get my drift. Like just where, okay, there's a clear goal there. There's a structure that you follow. You work your way up the ranks, and you achieve success, and you achieve skills, and you build yourself, and it's kind of quite respected, and you become like kind of like a manly, masculine man, and I think that idea maybe is kind of sold to young people to recruit them or whatever, but
sure.
Through movies and videos and or whatever, the CSI effect, like they say about that. But yeah, I think martial arts is a very good alternative to that kind of a path where you can still build yourself, you can still achieve things, whether it's through competition or it's through your own internal struggle or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
So I notice you have a few questions of your own.
Dude,
we're running short on time here, so let's get into some of that stuff.
Man, I have a whole bunch of questions for you. Let me see here. What do I have? I think we talked about quite a bit actually.
Yeah.
The traditional martial arts versus the MMA culture. And, this maybe we can talk about this. This is a pretty cool question. So, what do you think traditional martial artists can and should learn from, let's say, more modern combat-oriented martial artists?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think
so many directions we could go there. The first thing that came to mind is emphasis on athleticism. And I know I mentioned that before, but I can't mention that enough. Like, strength training is one of those things. If I could time travel back in time and give myself some advice, it would be lift weights, do more push-ups.
Get jacked.
And it's not that martial arts is all about being bigger or stronger, but it's
not nothing.
Yeah, it helps so much. Strength is the precedent for so much else in athletics. It allows you to use your technique more efficiently. Technique is not a is not a lack of strength, it is an efficient use of strength.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, just being stronger, it keeps you healthier. It would have allowed me to avoid so many injuries, I believe.
Absolutely. I agree.
In addition to that,
maybe I can put in and give you,
Sure.
give you a second. I think that after studying combat martial arts, specifically jiu-jitsu, I think also the lens that you look at your own art becomes much more sharp, right? And for me now, I feel like I have a much finer tooth comb when I practice a technique. I look at, how do we train it? Why do we train it? When do we train it? Do we train it enough? Do we train it too much? Is this applicable in real life? How do we use it? When do we use it? Right? So it's like the filter that you look at your technique from, I think, becomes honed, right? And I think one thing that Brian talked about a lot is like, sometimes, it's not enough to just practice the form and practice applications. Sometimes you have to taste the leather, you have to taste the leather. You have to put it under pressure,
Absolutely.
So I think that idea of pressure testing techniques is super, super critical. And I mean, I don't care what kind of martial art you do, whether it's boxing or Thai boxing or Hung Gar Kung Fu or Tai Chi or Wing Chun or Taekwondo or Aikido or Hapkido or whatever. I mean, if you practice things in the right way, I think they can be applicable, right? Under
absolutely.
certain circumstances and the right circumstances.
That brings me to the second point I'd like to make, which is I'd recommend traditional martial artists especially give yourself a goal, a very specific and concrete goal. If I could go back in time and give myself some advice, I would give myself that advice specifically. Come up with a very specific goal. Like when I started fighting professionally, I didn't have any ambitions of, I'm going to fight in the UFC. It was just like, I want to make an extra paycheck and, pay some bills or whatever. I don't care if I make it big. And, I would have come back and, just knock myself upside the head a little bit to say, no, make some very specific goals.
Yes.
Set the bar a little higher.
Yes. Well, I think that talks back to what I mentioned before, right? Like when you don't have a clear goal, when you don't have a clear track, when you don't have a clear path to follow, then like the future kind of becomes muddy and uncertain, right? And then you kind of go with what happens, right? Instead of having like when you're a ship's captain, right? Like you're sailing for, this new land and we're going that way and that's our destination. It's not like, well, let's just kind of go and see where we end up, right? Because I mean, there's no, you won't reap the same rewards that you would if you had a real goal and a real direction, right? Yeah. So I absolutely agree. Let's see.
What else do you have?
Let's see. This is an interesting point.
Okay.
Why? And this is something I kind of believe that I mentioned before about evolution.
Right.
Why do you think? And then we can go a lot of ways, like you said. Why do you think that traditional martial arts have evolved slower than the combat martial arts in terms of integrating and becoming working together? Like, let's say, combining boxing with wrestling or taekwondo with, jiu-jitsu, or it seems like they're kind of maybe like 20 years behind everybody else in terms of integrating.
The easy answer for that is combat sports are, live and you test and all that. But even looking back at combat sports, like take Dave Camarillo, for example. He was one of the coaches at the American Kickboxing Academy, notable for being, I think, the first American to hold a black belt in both judo and jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
He wrote this book called Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu back in the day.
Sounds
and
cool.
It is a good book. It's a great book. It's basically just about combining the best elements of judo and jiu-jitsu, which was his shtick. But he was met with a lot of resistance from both the judo and the jiu-jitsu community. Like, no, that's not the way. That's not how we do things.
Yeah.
So there is dogmatism, even in these testable combat sports. The same kind of dogmatism we'll see in traditional martial arts quite often. And I think that's a lot of it is the mere exposure effect. You heard about it? Or we're just exposed to something, and so we just kind of take it for granted. Like, well, that's obviously the best way to go because we're just exposed to it over and over again. It's how advertisers try to get you by just repeating something over and over until we believe it's the truth, whether it is or isn't. Right. So, man, I think what separates a traditional martial art from why we call them traditional martial arts in the first place is because they are taught traditionally. They're taught through forms, for example. They come from an era where printing books weren't a big thing, or they didn't exist, or they didn't have videos. You couldn't take a picture of it. And so what did you do? You made a form to teach this method. And so much can be lost in translation there. And so people, in order to try to preserve the form, it's all about doing it exactly the way they were taught. And anything else is bad and wrong and whatnot. It's a lot like the dichotomy between classical ballet and modern dance. Modern dance came out in the 1920s. It was a sharp juxtaposition to classical ballet where if you don't move your arms and your legs exactly in this certain line, it's not classical ballet anymore. And the modern dance community, the pioneers said, how about we move however we want to and call it dance? Because there's more than just one way to do it. But again, anytime we change things, anytime we change things up or challenge the norm, we are met with opposition.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
No, I gotta say that, I agree absolutely, and I think there's culture to it as well. You know, whether it's like the let's just take Chinese martial arts as an example because I think that's what I'm most familiar with. There's definitely kind of a resistance to change, you know, but me personally, I've always been drawn to or attracted to innovators, people who make their own ideas or make their own interpretation. You know, whether it's Bruce Lee or it's Sifu Dragos. He's one of the top guys in Wing Chun, and he kind of took the classic Wing Chun and like interpreted it in his own way and kind of changed it and kind of, some might say, like evolved it or upgraded it. And another great example is Sifu Wan Kam Leung. He's from Hong Kong, and he's also taken like the classic Wing Chun system and altered it and evolved it, and some people would argue improved it vastly. And you know, so, but absolutely as well, he was met with a lot of resistance. You know, always people who innovate and who change and who are trying to do something new will always be met by naysayers and people who, you know, don't believe that it can happen. And on one hand, I kind of understand it. Like getting back to those guys who are kind of talking trash about traditional martial arts. I mean, sometimes you just have to go by what the evidence shows, right? What does the evidence show? Well, the evidence shows that traditional martial arts didn't really hold up the same way the combat martial arts did, right? Boxing, Thai boxing, kickboxing, right? They evolved far faster and adapted far more quickly to the MMA environment than the traditional martial arts did, right? But I think now you can start to see some traditional martial arts elements coming out, right? Whether it's like Taekwondo or it's Jeet Kune Do, maybe it could be Wing Chun as well in the future. I personally, though, I don't agree that because something has not worked up until now doesn't mean it can't ever work.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to find. Like basically when I started doing Wing Chun again, I gave myself, okay, you're going to go back to Wing Chun, you're going to try really, really hard, and you're going to train intensely, and you're going to do it in 6 months. And if you feel an improvement, and if you feel you have actually gained usable skills within those 6 months, then you can keep doing Wing Chun. But if you can't, if you feel that you haven't made enough progress, you haven't developed usable skills after 6 months, then it's time to let it go. So that's kind of the challenge or the circumstance I gave myself. So it's like, you can try to make this work. If you feel like you can, if you feel like you can pressure test it, after 6 months of training, okay, that's good. You can keep going.
That is really interesting because so many people in traditional martial arts, even ones or schools that are not effective, especially those, because they've invested so much time in it, they feel they have to keep doing it.
Yes.
Like, I got a black belt in this, so I have to keep doing it forever.
Yes. I think you've got to be able to let go what doesn't work and adapt what can work. I think that's the key. And I mean,
where have I heard that before?
Yeah. I mean, and you have to be able to realize that you can find the same joy that you get from your martial art from another martial art. Maybe that's more effective, or that could be more street applicable, right? Like, because I never thought I could like another martial art the same way that I like Wing Chun. But in fact, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it was just as technical, just as complex, just as complicated, just as so beautiful and elegant. You know, it was really like an art, because I think that's what Wing Chun is. It's like an art and a puzzle, and I've got just the same, like that addiction, like, oh, I have to do this, I have to solve this. But the nice thing, I think that the thing jiu-jitsu in particular has over any traditional martial art is that you get to regularly practice with people at 100% resistance, and you don't kill anyone.
Yeah, that's huge, man.
Traditional martial arts, they're like, I'm so tired of these guys that say like, oh, I can't spar because my techniques are too deadly, bro. You know, I'll have to eye gouge you, or it's not real, you know? Like, oh, come on, man, that's bullshit. You know, that's just bullshit. Like, if your system really works, if your kung fu really works, then you should be able to use other techniques besides eye gouges.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? I mean,
I had a guy come into my gym once, and he gave me the whole my martial art's too deadly.
It's too dangerous.
Like, well, let's find out. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. I'm not even gonna punch you. I'm just gonna grapple. Yeah. Yeah. I had him, tapping out 5 different ways pretty soon. I mean, against untrained grappler, that's pretty simple to do.
It is, and I think, and I hope, the next generation of Wing Chun practitioners already are, because I get so much feedback from my channel about I do Wing Chun. Oh, I started BJJ as well. Oh, I do wrestling now too with my Wing Chun. Oh, I do Thai boxing, Wing Chun, and jiu-jitsu. It's great. I get so much feedback like that. The next generation of Wing Chun masters and Wing Chun practitioners will take it the next step, and maybe in there there'll be the Wing Chun GSP. I don't know. I mean, maybe there will.
Could be, man. Could be. I know a lot of people on the internet love to make fun of Wing Chun, but I always see people, not always, but I run into people now and then who practice Wing Chun or these other martial arts, and sometimes they'll surprise me. Like, Jordan, I was playing around with a rubber knife with him once and just trying to stab him, and somehow he's able to block everything and disarm the knife. I'm like, how the heck did you do that, man?
Yes. I think the biggest problem in Wing Chun in particular is no quality control. So anyone can be a Wing Chun master. No real life testing, no resistance testing, right? No sparring, and no sparring with other styles, and no competitions. If we could remedy these 3 things, because Wing Chun is so beautiful, man, the theory behind it is so amazing and elegant, and if we could just fix those 3 things and find somehow that we could all just be cool and have a competition and not kill each other and not get all upset and flustered, I think there's potential there for real growth. Yeah,
absolutely agree.
Do you want to call her there?
Sounds good to me. Hey, Tyler, thank you so much.
It's been
love
such
to
a
have
pleasure.
you back anytime, man.
I would love to be back. We still got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yes, we do. All right, Tyler Casselman, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Go check this guy out. What's your channel called?
You can just look me up, Tyler Casselman, Casselman, or you can search The Wing Chun Pilgrim. And I'm on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
I'll put links down in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. Get out there and train.
Nice one.